All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Boundaries Webinar Wednesdays. My name is Shaish Shangore, and I will be guiding you through this webinar. So first off, just a couple of housekeeping items to talk about. In your GoToWebinar control panel, there's a questions pane on the right-hand side. And so as we go through the webinar, if you have any questions or comments about what I'm showing in the moment, please type your questions into that panel. And at the end of the webinar, we'll leave a time for our questions and answers, and we'll get to those. Next would be regarding everyone being muted. And so just so you know, everyone right now is currently muted. And so you can hear us present, but you wouldn't be able to speak out or speak to each other. And so once again, really the only way to get your voice heard is to ask a question. And so as the webinar is going on, if you have any questions in the moment, please type them in. So that way, at the end of the webinar, we'll have a steady stream of questions to respond to and make the entire session more interactive. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. So this is our short agenda we're going to have today. Basically, we're just going to go through a quick introduction, and then talk a little bit about why we need to, change MultiCAD data, and then get into a live demonstration of the software. And so, just a quick introduction about Boundary Systems and who we are. We are a product development and consulting company based out of Cleveland, Ohio, but really have a reach that extends way beyond Cleveland. We have many different capabilities and disciplines internally, everything from product lifecycle or data management to CAD design and consulting, and also simulation as well. And we've already proven that we can help customers get to greater levels of success, as evidenced by many of the awards we've won as well, as we've grown over the years, essentially showing that we only grow because our partners grow, as they work with us. All right, so getting down to the depth of the presentation. And so the first thing we'll lead off with is, have you ever experienced difficulty with, for example, leveraging MultiCAD data, right? Or another case would be, late-stage design changes, right? You realize late in the game that something needs to be changed on the design model before it can get to production, and your hands are tied as to how to do that, and you don't want to go ahead and remodel the entire design from scratch, right? Or even if we talk about the first one there, leveraging MultiCAD data, being able to not only use or import third-party CAD data into your models cleanly, but also sometimes being able to modify them. Sometimes having a third-party model and realizing, oh, I want to make this change, and I don't want to have to send it over to someone else to make the change for me. I can just save time by doing it right now. And then the third piece here is something that may apply more to CAD administrators, but data migration. So either you have a case where one company acquired another that was in a different CAD system, or the same company is switching from one CAD system to another. You always have the question of how do you handle data migration? How do you handle CAD data that comes from one software being used in another? And basically how you handle that. And we're going to go over many of those different things in this particular webinar. All right. So Creo users typically have some capabilities to work with and edit CAD data from suppliers, vendors, distributed design, and partners as well. And so traditionally, without these tools within Creo or in non-Creo CAD programs, it's usually more difficult to make changes to the geometry. And so supporting MultiCAD is a common challenge that faces many industries because not many companies always have all of their CAD data structured in one system. In fact, in terms of a market opportunity, 59% of customers surveyed said that they struggle to modify imported models coming in from other CAD tools. And then another, 49%, that's just about half of them say that, just importing models from other CAD tools alone is a challenge. And so, leveraging Creo, users will have the flexibility to make fast changes to the geometry from any CAD source. And so, essentially eliminating their MultiCAD challenges. Now, these changes are also going to be similar to direct modeling capabilities, and so it solves the challenge of having to edit non-native heterogeneous CAD data. So in other words, I don't care what the feature was in the other CAD package that designed the geometry. All I care about is I want to move a certain edge or a certain face over by a couple of inches, and I can do that without having to understand whatever the other software was, be it Catia or NX or Solidworks. I don't have to know how to model in those. I just want to change the geometry, and I can do that very easily now inside of Creo Parametric. Another would be basically managing change, particularly late-stage design changes. Now, change is evidently prevalent throughout the entire product development process, but again, you'll notice that the closer and closer we get to production, the more big the impact of late-stage design change typically is, and so the more critical it is that it's done timely in a quick fashion, so that way you can update required tooling, or manufacturing and other downstream deliverables can proceed as planned as well. The direct modeling capabilities inside of Creo Parametric deliver the speed and flexibility to address late-stage design changes very, very easily and quickly. And so just to give an idea of the market opportunity, in this particular scenario, 38% of users experience dramatic or last-minute design changes. And actually, I think that that number is quite low. I would put that at 100% of users because when you've completed your design, your customer always comes back to you and says, "Hey, do you mind making this major change or this minor change?" That ends up creating basically a last-minute or late-stage change scenario. Next is, about 40% of users, have difficulty modifying models that were created by others, even if they were created on the same CAD system, right? And so again, if your colleague creates a model and he's on vacation and you're supporting the product and you have to, make the change before it goes into production, your hands are tied on how you can quickly make a geometric change to, say, for example, add a draft on a certain face, right? Those are things that you'd be able to address now very quickly and easily inside of Creo Parametric. And then last off is the CAD Data Migration, which, again, to use one simple word, is very challenging. And so typically, when you're working with CAD data from multiple, softwares, either through, vendor data or supplier data or distributed collaboration partners, typically it's more difficult to reuse or even import or even impossible to import geometry just to use in your design. And in some cases, we even have customers that say, they end up, having to redesign some of these parts that come in from other CAD packages that they can't modify to suit the new demand need or the new design need. And so they just have to redesign everything from scratch, which is basically wasted productivity at that point. And then the other challenge would be migrating data. Company A acquires company B, and now they want to transfer their CAD data from one system to another, and usually at that point it's paying for some very expensive migration software or paying for lots and lots of man hours of computers and servers churning out hundreds of thousands of CAD data from one software to another. PTC Creo Parametric virtually eliminates that particular need because Creo Parametric can very easily open MultiCAD data from Catia, NX, and Solidworks. And so which basically means you can start to make those changes or migrate your data on the fly. You don't have to spend a ton of money migrating all the data up front, only to find out you only use 10% of the data, right? Yeah, as you need the legacy data, you can migrate that data into Creo Parametric, open it natively, and start to make changes to that to, again, leverage that information to create new and better products in the future. So at this point, I'll pause for a second here and get into a live demonstration of the software. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started with the demonstration portion here. Now, currently what I have opened is a SolidWorks part, but I'll actually close out of it and get back into it again, just so you can see how easy it is to use and leverage MultiCAD data in Creo. So right now, what I'll do is I'll open a couple of different data from different CAD packages, and we'll work with them almost as we're working with native Creo files. In this case, you'll notice right now what I have is a SolidWorks part. And I'll go ahead and pick on that one and open it, and you'll notice it opens natively, almost like it's its own Creo model, right? And so this, again, eliminates the headache of having to import, data from many different CAD vendors. Previously, Creo Parametric 3.0 and upwards now supports native Catia files, NX files, and SolidWorks files, and so you can open those very simply and easily just using your basic Creo license. Next up, I'll start diving into the geometry editing process here, or into the model editing process, and we'll just go ahead and start off with this. Say, for example, this particular hole right here, we want to modify that. We want to change that to a different diameter or a different size based on our new design requirement, right? We have a legacy model that we now want to repurpose for something else. Well, right as we start to make the change, Creo reminds us and says, hey, this change you're making is going to be native to Creo and it's not going to be reflected in the native CAD model. So in other words, it's not going to be reflected back in the SolidWorks part that we currently have, and it just says, to save a copy if we want to convert this Creo model back. And essentially what this is highlighting to us is that it's going to temporarily break the associativity between the geometry in the SolidWorks part and what we currently have on screen right now. And that's simply because, if we could very easily model and edit everything that SolidWorks can and save it back in SolidWorks, then there would be no need to have SolidWorks. And so this just shows a step that there's a data translation inside of Creo that's taking on all that burden of modifying the geometry, as you go along. And so we'll just go ahead and hit OK right here, and now we are free to modify this geometry however we want. Say, for example, we want to make this, to a radius of 24. We can very easily set that and be on our way. Next, for example, would be, let's see here, we'll switch it over this way. And let's say, for example, we want to modify some rounds. We want to manipulate some rounds. Say they're either too big or too small. Right? We can very easily pick on those and then start to edit them. And we can make them, smaller, bigger. We can even select multiple rounds and change them all at the same time. Another example would be, say you want to push or offset a surface by a certain amount. You want to move a surface over or thicken or reduce the thickness of a particular wall, right? That's very easy to do now inside of Creo Parametric because you can very easily use some very simple geometry editing features to modify the geometry as you wish, and it'll always respond to you in real time. Right? What if I want to rotate that surface this way? You can very easily do that. Now, some of you probably look at that and think, okay, yes, that was just a freehand move. What if I want to have a hard dimension to my move? What if I want 10 inches offset and no more or no less? Well, again, it's very easy to do that. So we'll go ahead and show that in this example here. And we'll just go ahead and say, hey, let's look for the distance between these two surfaces. And now we have a dimension that we can very easily manipulate and change. Let's say we want to make that 255. So that, in this case, that suits our design intent. You'll now notice very easily that that Creo, changes the data, and we still have our full CAD model that's now completely edited. And now that distance there is set to 255. Now I'll actually pause on this point and show what's going on, because it's fairly easy to miss the point that what we just created is a feature that now is editable inside of Creo, almost like a native CAD feature. This is almost like a native extrude in Creo. You can double click on that dimension now and set it to whatever you want, and the Creo model will regenerate almost like it's a native feature, right? And so what we basically have in this case is we're building back intelligence into a dumb solid, into a part that when we opened it up initially was just a typical SolidWorks part with no model tree history to it at all. And now as we begin to make these different changes, Creo says, hey, I'm going to remember what you're changing, so that way if you want to modify the change or remove the change, you have the history right there. So we're basically building back intelligence into a dumb solid as well. Okay, so next is we'll take a look at this particular rib right here, and you'll notice there's a fairly complex round at the bottom of this rib. But whenever we go ahead and manipulate this, we'll pick on only the rib itself and move it. And you'll notice that Creo is intelligent enough to understand that, hey, the round is connected to the rib. I'm not just going to leave the round there as an orphan. If I'm moving the rib, I'm going to grab the round as well with it. Which basically means that this is a very robust geometry editing tool. This isn't the case where you're going to spend countless hours figuring out how to manipulate the geometry, or you select something that doesn't work because the software doesn't troubleshoot itself. In this case, the software is very robust. It understands what you're trying to do, and it will even cover for cases where you don't select all the required geometry, like in this case where it automatically grabs a round as well with it. Even in fact, what if we want to take this hole and even pull it down even further while we're in the process of making huge changes? Let's make the changes as big as we can. In this case, you'll notice now that hole is completely removed from over there. Now, another typical myth-busting thing about Creo Parametric, and this is one of the reasons why I love it, is the fact that with these new tools, you can begin to do things that prior to this were not easy to do or not even possible. And so, as anyone will tell you, it's next to impossible to place a draft on a surface that's already rounded off, like this case over here. Well, in the case of this software, it's very, very easy to do. We can just simply tell Creo, hey, let's add, I don't know, we'll call that, say, a 7-degree draft on that face, right? Very simply, very easily, with about 3 clicks. Yeah. Another example could be, let's say we want to get rid of some rounds, right? So the customer has some rounds in certain areas that we want to delete or get rid of. It's very easy for us to just go ahead and select those and then get rid of that. And likewise over here as well. And then also as well, we can come over to this right here and say, for example, we want to get rid of this rib. If the customer put the rib there, you really don't need it. It's just going to add more material, or it's detrimental to the design. So we can very easily select on that and say, hey, let's get rid of it. And it's almost like it never existed. Again, you'll notice everything I'm doing here, I'm manipulating this model almost like this was something created in Creo, but it was not. This is an entirely dumb solid that we're now building intelligence into and tweaking it to fit our needs, depending on what we want to, or what change we want to make as a late-stage design change, or even readapting this to fit another design scenario in the future. Now, the beautiful thing about this is all these different features remain or live in your model tree, and so you can either manipulate each one there, or if you want to go back to your CAD model as it initially was before any change was made, you can very easily get rid of all those different features, and you have your CAD, your SolidWorks model as you started off with before you ever made any changes to it. Right? So it maintains your feature history, making sure that you don't have to go back and redo work to undo something that you did manually. You can very easily, revert back into it and make a change that propagates through the entire model. All right, and so I'll pause here and I'll switch from this model and open an NX file. In this case, you'll notice this is an NX model of a rim, and we'll go ahead and open this almost like it's a native Creo file. You'll notice in this case, it comes in as an NX file with its own symbol and no model tree history to it at all. But again, we can very easily start modifying this as well. So say, for example, the customer got too happy and put way too many holes for bolts through these different areas. Well, it's very easy for us to select on those. And then from within Creo, we can start to understand what's going on. We can build back intelligence into the model and tell it, hey, let's do a pattern recognition, and you'll notice Creo automatically analyzes the geometry, understands that there's a pattern there, and we can now even modify the pattern. We can say, what if we want to cut down that number in half? We can very easily start to modify the pattern there in the future. Again, I'm modifying this pattern like I'm using NX, but really I'm not. I'm just using Creo and I'm editing the geometry. This is something that you would not be able to do otherwise if you did not have Creo Parametric. Now, the other thing to mention as well is that I'm doing everything right now from within this one tab over here in Creo Parametric, but if you're already used to the different Creo tools like the extrudes, revolves, sweeps, blends, holes, and things like that, you can use all of those features just as is as well. You don't have to selectively learn new features, that you don't currently already know. All the part creation features and tools inside of Creo Parametric will work in a non-native model to generate new geometry. So from the start to finish, that basically shows how you can start with Creo Parametric, take a non-native
file, like an NX file or a SolidWorks part or even a Catia file, make some changes to it to suit your current design needs, and then go about and you can go about on your way. Now, for this particular model, say for example, or even the other model, say for example we wanted to save this back as a different file format. Say we have a scenario where we're collaborating on design with another customer that's using SolidWorks, right? Or a vendor or partner that's using SolidWorks. Well, it's very easy from within Creo to save this as a SolidWorks part, right? When the customer opens this, it's basically guaranteed to open because you're opening something that to their CAD system is native. Or in this particular example, this rim is an NX file, so I can very simply save that back as an NX file. And now my change with the lug nut pattern will pass on to my design partner that's collaborating with me on this part. So at this point, we'll go ahead and close the live demo here, and we'll switch back to the questions and answers. But before we get to questions and answers, we'll just go ahead and recap what we've just talked about right now. So what we've just seen is that Creo Parametric provides the ability for you to edit a non-native CAD geometry. And so that way you can make late-stage design changes very quickly and easily. You can add drafts where you need to. You can offset faces where you need to. You can delete features where you need to. You can delete geometry where you need to. And so you can make changes very quickly to heterogeneous CAD data, and you can also save it back as a non-native file, so that way you can support the collaborative design effort with someone else on another CAD system. You can also rebuild back into the CAD model some design intent. So basically it comes in as a dumb solid, and you don't have to sit there understanding what the other guy did, or you don't have to sit there tweaking the model. You can rebuild back patterns and rebuild back intent into the CAD model, so that way it behaves as a responsive, parametric, intelligent model once again. And then finally, this also reduces the burden on very expensive data migrations, where you have to spend countless man-hours and dollars up front, converting every single CAD file before it's even used. In this case, you can open the CAD file on demand as is. You can open the SolidWorks, Catia, NX file, whatever it is. You can open it on demand, and as your engineer needs to make a change, they can make a change, save it back as a Creo file if you're converting to Creo, and now you just basically migrated the data. But we're not spending countless hours beforehand doing it. We're just changing it on demand, right? And so this eliminates the case where you spend, thousands of dollars migrating 100% of your legacy data, only to find out that your engineers really only use 30% of that legacy data in future designs, right? So at this point, we'll open the floor up for questions. If you have any questions, now would be a good time to ask them in the GoToWebinar control panel, which is on the right-hand side of your screen. All right, so I just had a question that popped in here. So a customer was asking, whenever you open the NX, or I guess the NX or Catia or SolidWorks file, are you able to see either model tree history or the way the features were made from the other CAD package? And the answer to that is no. So it comes in almost like a dumb solid. So you won't be able to see the model tree history from SolidWorks, for example. But again, in the case of Creo, we don't really care about that because we're not trying to, have you learn SolidWorks so you can understand their features and then change it. All you need to do is to take a look at the geometry and figure out what you need to change and then change it immediately. You don't have to understand what the features are or what the design intelligence is behind the scenes. All right, and there's another question here. It's a little bit unclear. It's asking with Creo 2 or Creo 3, does it have to be flexible modeling? For that, yes, with Creo 2 and 3, you do have the access to flexible modeling, which is a very robust way to change or edit your models, but it does not have to be flexible modeling. If I wanted to, place a chamfer on an edge of an imported part, I can do that very easily using the chamfer tool from within Creo. Or if I wanted to add another box or another feature to an existing non-native CAD data, I can very easily do that with an extrude tool or revolve or any of the other default data, or I guess feature creation tools inside of Creo. I just shied away from that because almost everyone that starts using Creo starts off with the extrude feature, and so I figured, let's not delve into that because it's almost basic. All right, there's another question here that says, are there any file formats that will not import? For that, I'll have to get back to you on. I know PTC has a data export and import page on their website that basically has a list of all the different file formats, the different versions that are supported, and also when they're supported. And so we'll have to review that and get back to you on which of the file formats do not import. Yep. All right, so it looks like the questions river here is drying up, which is totally fine. I'll just go ahead and put my contact information on screen as well. So you have my email up there. If you have any questions about what you've seen today or what we've talked about in this webinar, please don't hesitate to email. If you have any questions on sales or how much is any question that is going to result in a dollar figure for the answer, you can email Steve Seymour right there on screen as well. All right. Thank you so very much for attending this webinar. It was great having you on. Go have a wonderful rest of your day, and we will also go ahead and post this recording to our YouTube site as well, so that way you will have access to this. Thank you so much for the webinar, and, for attending the webinar, I should say, and have a wonderful day. Thank you.